Thank you so much. It's perfect to follow Julie's talk as well, because now we've kind of set up the problem. We've talked a little bit about some of the hope and beauty that we have with some of the science solutions, and now we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about what can art do. And spoiler, I don't have the answer. And that's the good thing about art, is that mostly we're like, oh, look at all of these new questions we found. So kind of thinking about the differences that science can do for us. Science, we have a question, and we're looking for an answer. And then the arts, we disturb and disrupt, and we're like, look at all of these new questions. So that's going to be a little bit of the theme of what we're doing today. I've also always wanted to have a slide that looked like a VW bug bumper stickered up with all of the amazing collaborators that have this work. I am representing many people and speaking on their behalf. Very fortunate to do so. Especially thankful to our partners at Austin Youth Riverwatch, which we're going to talk a little bit about our work with high schoolers there. And today's talk has a little bit of a jargony title, and we'll explain what that means. So it's performing environmental counter-narratives. So really what that means is, how do we use theater to tell our stories about climate change, not the messages that we've been given? So, and this work has been going on for a while. I didn't realize there was a common thread with Julie here as well, in that we got some money to do some work on theater and climate change in the good year of 2019. Theater work. In 2019, it was a very different time. So we had planned to do summer camps and to investigate young people's access points to climate change, and to think about, we always tell young people that they're the future, that they're gonna save us. We put all of this burden on them, but we don't really give them any power. And we were like, I wonder what theater might be able to offer in terms of kind of giving young people a stage, a role, and we had all this planned out, and then 2020, kind of 2020'd all over the place. And we moved online. So our partners at Austin Youth Riverwatch were also trying to figure this out. They're an amazing organization in town that takes young people and does active restoration processes with them. They have a very similar philosophy to us. Instead of humans just putting a fence around nature, they're like, oh, we are in relationship to nature, and so we should be a part of it coming back. And so we have a similar philosophy in the art side of things, of how we treat the world is very similar to how we are treating one another. So what if we use arts to open up and humanize that in order to... So we partner with them. We went online. We had 6 weeks with the high schoolers there. Luckily, in 2021, we were able to go outdoors. Y'all, I got to go to summer camp. It was so cool. So we would do ecological restoration during the day, and then the last hour I would do some theater with young people. And we were very interested, I'm going to take you through some of the steps that we went through. We were very interested in getting below the buzzwords. So we had been, a lot of the work that had come up for us in 2020 was like recycling and plastic straws, and we didn't really feel like these were our stories. So we were interested in kind of going deeper and thinking about what our stories are, those counter narratives I talked about. And then this year, I just got back from auditions for working with University of Texas undergraduate students. And I'm very excited to kind of start the next round of this. And we're gonna do another round of it, more in our bodies. So I'm gonna take you through some of the past work that we've done, as well as some of the aspirations for future work. So the first thing I'd like to do is a little bit interactive. So I'd be happy if you wanna shout out answers, I'll repeat them so people can hear them. What have you been told you should do to protect the environment, or to solve climate change? What have you been told you should do? Paper straws. Use paper straws, not plastic straws. Yes, over here. Recycle. You should recycle. No more instructions, though. Nothing about which one. What was this? What did I miss? There's one over at the bar. Eat more plants. Yeah, you should eat more plants. It's usually, yeah. So we have don't use plastic straws. I've been corrected many times by young people. Recycle, eat more plants. What else have we been told? Use public transportation. Don't drive your car. Yeah. Change your light bulbs. Yes. Change your light bulbs. Carpool. Clip the plastic rings around your things. You're killing turtles. Look at all we have a lot of things to take care of, everybody. How do we have time to go to work? Yeah, and these are the stories that we gathered with young people as well. Some of the other ones include, don't worry, we're gonna go to Mars. Or a lot of the young people also really savvy into a lot of the scientific techno-fixes as well, which are amazing and miraculous. But we had some wonderings about these things. And I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek, but we then took these stories that we are talking about here and we criticized them. So how many of the stories that we just heard about what we should do blame the individual? Almost every one of them, right? Like, you gotta eat plants, but we're not gonna support you to do that in any way. And the recycling, but don't worry about the organizations that are, the corporations that are actually making it quite difficult to do that. How many of these rely on shallow buzzwords? I learn every single day almost, especially from people younger than myself, that I don't recycle correctly. And I learned about paper the other day, anyway. And how many of these rely on shame, blame, or fear? We can even hear it in the tone of voice that they're being said with, of like, you should do this. And we know that fear and shame and blame are not great, sustainable theories of change. It might shame me into being vegan for a few years, but like, it's not lasting that long. And then this one that we're especially interested in, because we're interested in the social justice aspects, is how many of these solutions are actually leaving entire communities behind, especially these techno-fixes we're talking about. If we go to Mars, who's going to Mars? If some percentage of Austin is all getting electric cars, which percentage might that be? And so we did the same thing you did. Here's our big list. We have recycle, and we have donate money and we'll do it. Children are the future. All the way down, don't have a car, use public transport. So some of the same ones that y'all came up with as well. We took these, we criticized these, and we are interested in then pushing against these mainstream stories and finding our stories. And to do that, we do a bit of research and a bit of performance. So here's all the jargon, and I'm gonna explain each of these words to you because each of these words are very important to the why and the how of how we do things. So we do participatory action research in which University of Texas undergraduate students perform their own embodied counter-narratives about environmental justice. So participatory action research means we as researchers aren't coming in and saying, well, we've got a question and we're gonna research on you, and we also kind of probably know the answer. Instead, we are coming to participants, in our case, usually high schoolers or undergraduate age young people, and asking them, what are the problems that are of interest to you? Working together, for us, using a bit of research, a bit of theater, and then hopefully the results of that actually can lead to some actions to solve that problem of interest. And we talk about counter narratives. I explained this a little bit before, but just so that we can kind of have a common definition. Counter narratives are those narratives that emerge from marginalized viewpoints. Those are not those main ones. The ones that we were saying earlier about recycling and plastic straws, these are often media messages that we get, or mainstream messages. But what are our stories? What's around us? What capacities do we have? What's free and available and coming from our cultures? And then environmental justice, I probably don't have to tell a lot of you here, but climate change is not just a science problem, it's also a social problem. And those who are most affected by it are, it disproportionately impacts our marginalized communities. So it's a social issue as well. So we are interested in making things visible. I really appreciated that picture of the bleaching coral earlier, of how making things visible can really help us think about these things and process these things. So we're interested in how this kind of research and performance, what does this process do for young people? And we're interested in, from this, what insights emerge about what we should do on campus. From this, how does this affect our sense of role? Do we feel like we maybe have more agency in this? Do we feel like we can actually make a difference? And then how does this affect our narratives? I'm really interested in these kind of dystopian doom and gloom narratives that we have about climate change, and how can we, like the coral, open up a little bit space for resilience? And I'm thinking about these kind of pushback narratives, these counter narratives, as a way to maybe think about that. All right, and so we gather we did the part that we did together. We gather all our stories about what we were told we should do. We criticize those, and then we have a lens for looking at our communities in terms of what is already there, what's already free, what's already available to us. We've got all sorts of linguistic capital and folks that navigate multiple cultures. And so the young people then go out and interview people who they consider experts, come back, we look for themes in those interviews, and then we put those themes on the stage. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about some things we found in some of the past work as a way to tell you about what I'm really, really curious about. Like I said, in the arts, we often end up kind of finding more questions than we do answers. And so come along with me on the journey. So one part of that is, I put these words on the slide and I was like, duh. When people feel listened to, they feel more agency, but it's not actually how we end up treating young people when it comes to climate change. We tell them, oh, don't worry, you'll solve it, and then there's not a space to process it. There's not a space to talk about it. And so when we talk to young people about these things, they say, actually, I felt like you adults got out of the way and we were able to feel listened to about what we were saying. So we're really, really curious about the role of theater in that. When you have a performance where people are listening to you and your experiences and the wealth that you already have in your communities, what happens there for making kind of tiny spaces for humanizing ourselves, humanizing each other, and then hopefully making some change. And then the part that is just still bothering me in a really, really good way, and the whole reason we're doing another round of this, is many of us know that our bodies hold a lot of our fears, our bodies hold a lot of our trauma. And we noticed a huge difference in the ways we were talking when we were kind of up in our heads and the ways that we were talking when we were performing. So our interview data had lots of richness and resilience. We learned about, for example, there was one young person whose family had immigrated from India to Canada and then to Texas, and she was telling us about their bathing practices and how they waste way less water than we do, and their food storage practices and how that wastes way less food. And so there was all of this possibility and all of this wealth that we were already seeing. But when we switched into final performance, we love a good young adult dystopian novel, and we just went right into doomsday. And so I was really, really curious about why, when we were talking with our words, there seemed to be a lot of possibility. But when we were talking with our bodies, we kind of went back to some of these old stories that we go on. And I don't have answers there yet. I'm very curious about what happens when we spend more time in our bodies processing these things. And so that's kind of the next step that we're going to work with. And so why theater? I've kind of mentioned some of it. Part of it is that it is very in your body. That was the whole struggle with 2020, is that it's a very present art. You have to actually be there. And it makes visible, in the form of characters, in the form of stories, these things that are invisible around us: injustice, climate change, things that are abstract. And so we can make these invisible things visible. It's also, sometimes to my great frustration, a collaborative art. I am a super introvert, and I don't know why I love this art so much that I have to work with other people with. But it is, and this collaboration ends up meaning that the stories that we come up with are something about the collective consciousness, not just our individual stories. And it comes back to that point I was making earlier of, I think if we treat the world how we treat one another, and if we change that, we might be able to change how we treat the world. And then another part I also struggle with, I always love to just work in things I struggle with, is that instead of having a prescribed answer by the end, we have to wait and see what emerges. There's always surprises, there's always new questions, new insights, and theater is a great medium for that. Like I said, we use science for the things that we have a question and we want to answer for, and art is disruptive and resistant and opens up all of the questions that we didn't know were there. And so we use both in what we do. And with that, thank you so much, and I'd love to chat with you about how art might be able to help open up resilience for climate change. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. That was great. And let's do some Q&A. All right. Who has the first question? There in the back. I believe our first speaker, Julie, has the question.
So did the students feel uncomfortable trying to go into performance mode, and how do you get them to be able to step into that place?
Yes, this was also a very interesting intersection with coming out of lockdown. So it's a group of high schoolers, myself, all of us just trying to figure out how to be people in the world again. And on top of that, people learning to know one another and then trying to make theater together. So it's always awkward. And that awkwardness also opens up some space. And especially, you can kind of, that vulnerability that happens when you're doing some of these theater exercises actually can open up some space for humanity, some space for trust and connection. So I find it not always a defect. Theater can be a very awkward thing to do and a very silly, it's so silly and it's so serious. And I think that both of those things can happen there. But yes, as it is, I also work with scientists with theater, and it's just as difficult for all of us. It's difficult to be in our bodies after we haven't for a while. Great question, thank you.
Next question. I have a question for you, if I may. How do you keep it from being corny? There's always a disconnect, because generally when older people try to talk to young people, it looks forced. How do you avoid that?
How do I keep it from being corny on my end? That's really the only end I would worry about, yeah. 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 How do I keep it from being corny? Yeah, they are not ever corny. They're always very heartfelt and have a lot of amazing things to say. I keep it from being corny. Most of my job is just listening. I don't, the offers that I bring to the table are, I have some theater tools and I am willing to be goofy and corny in those ways. But I don't really come in and tell them what I think we should do. I'm just like, hey, I'm here. These are some tools that I have to do. I have some research tools we can use. I have some theater tools we can use. And the rest is just me listening. So it ends up being less corny. I'm still super corny, but it ends up being less propaganda, less preachy, and less corny in the ways that they can really sniff out, because they know I can build trust in it. They know I'm just there to like listen and play silly theater games with them and lift up their voices.
Thanks. Next question. I saw some hands a second ago. I'll go.
Hi, Nick. What kind of support or structure is available to the kids after you work with them so that they can take all these new ideas and new ways of seeing and do something?
That is a question we are still working with. Yeah. Because actually, one of the two big main things that we hear is, first, we hardly ever get to talk about this, and we're so happy we have a space to talk about this. And then the second one is, okay, now what do we do? And I still struggle with that one. I think that I need to do a better job of connecting with people who are kind of doing those action pieces. So that's an ongoing question, and I think a really important one. Thank you.
I kind of want to follow up on that one. Kind of what comes to mind is aftercare. There needs to be some aftercare for them, because now they're exploring this, discovering these things in their body, these questions, these struggles, these frustrations, these traumas related to it. And how do you go about developing aftercare and encouraging them to continue to care for themselves and reach out to others to manage those things that they're uncovering within themselves and how they perceive the world?
No, I really appreciate this as well. And in this next iteration, we, for the first time, are collaborating with a therapist, especially since we are asking them to spend longer times in the body, processing emotions that are like overwhelming at times. So we have a climate anxiety aware and somatic aware therapist who's going to be there in the room with us. Part of that is also figuring out what that is. I only know of, I've only been able to find one other theater practitioner who's worked with counselors in that way. But there is some framework there. And I just want to make sure that there is a container that's built. And I'm not a therapist, so that, yeah, exactly what you said so well. That should be something that is taken care of. So thank you. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we're hoping to have some documentation of that. Yeah, thank you for that offer. Thank you.
Okay, last question. We're going to go here.
Was there an insight that really surprised you, or something that like you found particularly striking, from the work you've been doing the last few months?
An insight for me, I'm going to speak from my perspective. I wish this was cooler, and this is more of like really humbling. I am constantly learning the ways in which I need to unlearn things. For instance, in the first iteration of this project, I was like, you know who kids think are experts? Scientists. Y'all, nobody told me. And so thinking and mostly by listening and being like, oh, that is a super like colonized way of thinking. And then, and I feel like I keep unlearning things. There's even struggles I have here with this of like, oh, if I am coming in with a question, I'm not collaborating from the start. What does that mean? Or would it take a really, really long time to do that? So there's always kinds of ways that I'm unlearning oppressive systems that I'm a part of. There's so much messiness. Yeah, it's mostly just me listening and being like, oh no, I did it again. And then getting back up and showing up again. Yeah, thank you for that.